humblemud.
I don't normally do this, but I jumped onto this social media gaming grid trend that's been going around, initially for fun, but ended up finding it substantially harder to put together than I thought it would be. Now, this isn't a hot takes kind of gaming channel, but I do have a few in here, as well as some of my favorite games of all time, so just keep that in mind. And I tried to keep this list fresh and not put one game for multiple entries or an entire grid of Mario games, because I could have totally done that too. So I'm hoping that this will be a lot of fun for you guys. Let's start off with the bottom right of the grid and work our way slowly to my favorite game of all time. So that means the first one we're covering is a game everyone should play. Out of all the games that I've played, Journey is the only game that I have forced many of my friends to experience. And it's one that I love watching other people play for the very first time. I'm not going to spoil everything that makes this game special, but essentially this is a game with zero dialogue. It relies heavily on environmental storytelling, and it's one of those games with an undeniably fantastic art style, really breathtaking moments, and it's a very meditative, calming experience. Anytime I get stressed, this is one that I can just hop into and kind of forget the world for a little while. It's really short, so it doesn't take up a lot of your time. It's a really special game, and it's in my top 10 of all time. Nostalgic childhood favorite. Final Fantasy Adventure is a really fun one. This is one that I got on my Game Boy from like a flea market or something, I believe, for really cheap, and it's the very first Final Fantasy game I've ever played. Now, technically, it's part of the Mana series or Seiken Densetsu series, but I didn't know that. I just knew the Final Fantasy name, and I really wanted to experience it, and so this is where it all started for me. And right off the bat, the game has your attention when you're fighting this beast inside of a coliseum, and then there's this evil guy that kicks you off a cliff, and your character falls down this waterfall, landing hundreds and hundreds of feet below. This one has always maintained a special place in my heart. So you can imagine my surprise when I found out that there was a remake on the PlayStation Vita. It's called Adventures of Mana, and man, it was such a blast revisiting it all these years later. Best retro game. Now this one was really tough because there are so many amazing retro games, and it also kind of depends on what consoles you even consider retro, but ultimately I ended up going with Shenmue. Now this isn't a game that I grew up with. I actually experienced it in 2023 for the very first time, and it just absolutely blew me away. It was so ahead of its time, and I just can't really explain the feeling that this game gives you when you're just walking around through this world and hearing this really contemplative, almost ominous music. There's a degree of uncertainty and uncomfortable atmosphere when you're exploring through these towns, yet at the same time, there's a lot of really funny stuff going on here, especially with the voice acting, and this game really just entered my life at a really great time. I was going through a lot of different chaotic things, and meanwhile, I would come home and play this game that sort of forces you to take your time and just soak up the environment that you're in. Best with friends. Now, I've talked about this series many times. I'm a huge, unapologetic Gauntlet fan, and the 3D Gauntlet games, specifically Legends and Dark Legacy, are by far my favorites. I had to go with Dark Legacy here because that's where all of my favorite memories are. There was an iconic moment in my life where my friends came over to play this game for the very first time on the GameCube. It was for a birthday party that I had, and none of them had ever played this game before. We were getting tired of playing our usual Mario Kart and Super Smash Bros. And Halo and stuff like that, so they were like, what else do you have? I was kind of nervous, but I ended up pulling this one out, and this game ended up becoming the rest of our afternoon, the rest of our night, and the game that we ended up playing into the wee hours of the morning. Funny because we played it on a Wii. And I've also found that Gauntlet Dark Legacy is one of those games where if you know this game, you love this game. The next category is Turn My Brain Off, and this was one of the easiest ones. I almost went with a racing game because I do play a lot of racing games when I'm trying to just unwind and slow my brain down, but when it really comes down to it, I had to pick Doom 1993. The original Doom is honestly my favorite. I know everyone seems to love Doom 2, and the Super Shotgun is legendary, but it's the levels of Doom 93, specifically that very first episode, that I prefer the most. It is unbelievable how well even the vanilla version of this game holds up, but if you want to take it further, there are a plethora of mods, so many fun things to do in this game, and I can't get enough of it. Absolutely one of the greatest games of all time, if not the greatest. This one was a really fun one for me, one that I took a long time to think about, and then once I realized what it was, I was kind of proud of myself. So this category is not usually my thing, but which means basically a game that's not usually the type of game that you go for or are interested in, but suddenly, once you give it a try, it clicks with you. And for me, that's Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. Now, the reason that I put this one here is because I'm just honestly not a big puzzle games fan. Maybe it's sacrilegious to say, but I just don't particularly enjoy games like Tetris or Luminous or anything like that, like Match 3 games. And it's not because I find them bad, it's just that I feel really neutral to them. And I think a lot of that is because there's not a character for me to rally behind or to care about. Captain Toad was really that one that married that feeling of adventure that I really love with puzzle-focused gameplay. And this was one I played one night around Christmas, and Miss Humblemud came in and ended up watching me play level after level after level. And I remember that we hit the credits and I was so sad because I thought the game was over so soon. Like, I swore I had only played it a couple hours, only to realize that the game gives you credits after each act. And so then when Act 2 opened up, I was so happy because I had more of Captain Toad to play. It's such a good game, and I hope that it can continue in some sort of fashion in the future. Best multiplayer. Now, this one was a hard one because some of you may know that for almost a decade before I started doing this channel and playing a lot of single player games, I was playing pretty much exclusively online multiplayer games. And while Smite is the one that I've put the most time into, I would say, and RuneScape and Super Smash Bros., I ultimately went with Rocket League because my memories of this game are the most fond. There is such a high skill ceiling to this game, yet it's still approachable and understandable. I mean, it's basically a racing game mixed with soccer. The music here is really fantastic, and there are a lot of songs from Rocket League that I still listen to today. And I just have so many fond memories of playing with my friends and entering those moments where everybody's in sort of a flow state and they're just playing in sync with one another without even communicating words, and we're just making plays. It's so fun. Best soundtrack. This one was super hard too, but I ultimately went with Phantasy Star Online. Now, PSO is another one that I didn't grow up with. Essentially, if it was on the Dreamcast, I didn't grow up with it because I didn't have a Dreamcast. But as you may have recognized from the intro of this video or any other video I put out, I love the general soundscape of PSO. The music is fantastic, but also the sound effects themselves are fantastic. And I think everything about this game forms a perfect blend that just like universally, intuitively makes a ton of sense coming together. I listen to this soundtrack all the time in my spare time. Favorite antagonist. Now, this is another one that I had to come back to because truthfully, in a lot of the video games I play, the villain is just some stereotypical evil guy that does evil and bad things. And so when I started going back and forth on this, I really didn't know what to pick. But ultimately, I ended up thinking about Alien Isolation. The Xenomorph is an iconic creature, probably my favorite horror-related creature in existence. And in this game, better than any other game that exists really, it feels like a true force. It feels like an animal, a highly intelligent animal that's stalking you, and it is terrifying. But also, I wanted to shout out the synths as well. They are really scary in this game too. More than any other game I've ever played, Alien Isolation's enemies were the ones who intimidated me the most, and so that's why I had to really go with this game when it comes to favorite antagonists. Favorite protagonist. Now, this one was easy. I went with my gut. Of course, I could have gone for a character that's really well written and deep and all those kinds of things, but honestly, deep down, Spyro the Dragon is probably my #1 cornerstone character. I talked about cornerstone characters in my Ty the Tasmanian Tiger Mario 64 video a couple weeks ago, and more than any other character in gaming history, it's gotta be Spyro for me. He's a character who, every time I see him, he just makes me smile. I root for everything he's done, even if the game isn't that great, like the Legend of Spyro series or the RPG that was on the DS and all that stuff. I just think there's so much more to unpack with this character, and I hope he gets some more games in the future. The Reignited trilogy is one of my favorite games of all time, and I'm so glad that we got him back, at least in that form. And I like how ridiculously edgy he is, even though he's a little kid, so he can't really be taken all that seriously. I mean, it's really hard to take a little purple dragon who says, "Where's Nasty Nork?" seriously.
Where's Nasty Nork? I'll torch him.
Keep your horns on, Spyro!
criminally overlooked. This one was so fun for me to reminisce on. I ended up going with Death Spank, and the reason why I selected this game is because it's not like it didn't review well, it's not like it didn't perform well. I mean, it did well enough to get a sequel, but the reason I picked this game is because if you're a young like Gen Z kid or even like a younger millennial, you've probably never heard of this game because it practically lived and died in the 2010s, and I myself missed out on it during the Xbox 360 era, and I don't even remember how I found it. I just kind of stumbled upon it one day, saw it on Steam for really cheap, thought it looked cool, and I decided to play it one day in the middle of an Elden Ring playthrough that I was doing, and no joke, Death Spank stole me away from Elden Ring until I hit the credits of it. And I didn't even realize this until later, but Death Spank was designed by Ron Gilbert, who is famous for games like the Monkey Island games, so it has a lot of really quirky and somewhat raunchy humor, but it's like juvenile in the best way to where, yeah, you roll your eyes a little bit, but it is going to make you breathe out of your nose and give you that occasional chuckle. And at the same time, the gameplay is really fun because it's essentially a very streamlined Diablo experience. I love the humor of this game, I love the art style of this game, I can't say enough about it. I still haven't played the sequel yet, but that's just because the first one was such a high that I worry the sequel just won't be able to capture that same sort of energy. Like a lot of the games on this list, it just hit me at the right time, you know? By far the easiest one for me to decide. Needs a remake? Easily. 100% went to The Legend of Dragoon. I believe and still believe that the biggest mistake that Sony's making right now when it comes to their PlayStation brand is ignoring the fact that they have a great IP in the form of The Legend of Dragoon. This isn't a game that just has a really small group of dedicated fans clamoring for a remake or some sort of revival to the series. This is a game that I really think would do numbers today because the common consensus on the internet is that it had so much potential, that the world was so interesting, and that if it just saw the facelift that you see with games like Final Fantasy VII, it could thrive and be its like true best self. And I just think that when you've got games like Expedition 33 especially, which proves that there is a big demand for this really involved turn-based combat, when you have all this stuff here, it's just, I just feel like it's right in front of Sony's face and they just won't do anything about it. Every time it goes on to Sony's digital storefronts from platform to platform, it performs really well, so I don't understand what they're waiting on. Now this one, you saw it in the thumbnail and hopefully you've had some time to kind of mentally prepare for this one. Yes, I did put Hollow Knight as my overrated pick. Now calling it overrated doesn't mean that I think it's a bad game. I put about 8 hours into it on my Nintendo Switch many years ago. It's a beautiful game, the music and atmosphere is good, I think the platforming's pretty good, I like the combat, but I just think it's good. Maybe even great, but not like a 10 out of 10. I can just count on my hands the many Metroidvanias that I've enjoyed more, like Metroid Dread, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, Batman Arkham Asylum, Blasphemous, so many others. And I think for me, this game has that sort of quality that scares me about Metroidvanias sometimes, where there isn't necessarily like a really intuitively designed silent hand that's kind of guiding you naturally through the environment of the game and allowing you to explore things and feel intelligent. Instead, it's rather aimless. Like, it takes a while before you get any sort of semblance of a map system, and I just often felt like the game didn't respect my time. I felt like if I don't use a guide, I'm going to spend hours and hours and hours just running through the same hallways trying to figure out what it is that I need to do next. After I did all of these things that I thought was going to get me to the next area only to hit another roadblock, I just got frustrated with it, and it didn't hold my attention enough to keep me interested to come back to it the next day, and I just never did. But yeah, that's not to say that I think it's a bad game or anything like that. I think it's a great game, and I'm so happy that it has found its fans. I'm so happy that it's become the sort of megalith within the indie scene that it has, and I'm really happy that everybody got Silksong, but it just wasn't really the Metroidvania for me, I guess. Now we're going to go to two other controversial gaming opinions. I'm sure the Grid Masters did this on purpose. Underrated game. I'm going to have to go with Silent Hill Downpour. Now, I played this game for the very first time last year. I played it on an Xbox 360 and got as close to the vanilla experience as I could, and I don't know, man. I just really liked this game. Yes, the monster designs are probably the weakest in the series, and the game does lean towards some sort of like Western gaming tropes, like when you fall down the water slides and stuff like that. But I also thought this game had a lot of special things going on. I love the story it tells. I love playing as Murphy. I think the whole idea of playing as a prisoner who basically crash lands within Silent Hill is super interesting. And I think the soundtrack is probably among the best that you could hope for in a Silent Hill game that doesn't have its typical composer. Miss Humblemud and I make a point to play the Silent Hill games together, and Silent Hill Downpour is one of the ones that we still discuss the most. I think if you're open-minded to it and you know some of the flaws that it has, you can still really enjoy it and find a lot of stuff that I think a lot of other people overlooked because they were too busy hating on it. And I could say the exact same thing for this next game, Overhated, Quest 64. Now, I've been a Quest 64 fan my entire life. I've told the story a few times now, but I got a Nintendo 64 bundle off of eBay when I was a kid. My brother and I had saved up our allowance money, and my mom got us this Nintendo 64 with a bundle of games, and Quest 64 was one of our favorites. Like, to us, it was no different than Mario 64, Star Fox 64, all those games, and I still stand by it that I love the colorful nature of this game. Yeah, it's got some difficulty spikes out of nowhere, especially with that very first boss in the forest. He will beat the crap out of you. Yes, the leveling up system is flawed. Make sure you invest in water. Yes, the game is very open, almost to a fault. It's sort of empty and uncanny feeling, but I think nowadays the game is more appreciated because it pretty much was a game built around liminal spaces before liminal space was really even a topic that people were talking about, and the game is filled with charm. There are all these times where you can see that something else was supposed to be there, but instead you're stuck with this. You know what I mean? But the cool thing about that is the game allows your imagination to fill in those blanks a lot of the time. And I don't know, man, Quest 64 is really fun. It has an awesome battle system, really unique. The only one that's really like it is Parasite Eve. I don't know, man. I think it's sick. Best combat, I went back and forth on. I almost picked the Batman Arkham games here, but ultimately I had to think about the one that I've spent the most time with that revolves entirely around combat. And for me, that would be easily, by far, Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U. I have always been a defender of this game, especially when Smash Bros. Ultimate came out, because Ultimate's online system is quite limited in comparison to Smash for Wii U. I would play For Glory on Smash for Wii U every single day when I was in college. Sometimes I was late for class and just straight up missed class because I was too busy playing this game. I'm not advocating for that, by the way, but that just goes to show how much I was interested in this. And when I got to Smash Ultimate, it just hit me like a wet noodle. There's no real way to continually battle the person that you're fighting against. In Smash for Wii U, if you were going against someone and they beat your main character, you could switch, and oftentimes thanks to that, you would find yourself fighting the same person for an hour, and you find that one perfect opponent that just really pushes you to your limits and you're both just going at it. There is nothing like that in Smash Ultimate, because the moment that you decide you want to play as another character, or you're I feel like I could beat him with my Pocket Wario or whatever, you have to disconnect from them. And it's also a lot harder to invite them to matches and to just make friends. It's so weird. The other selfish thing about Smash for Wii U that made me really love it is all of my characters became so good on that game. Mario, Ness, Yoshi, Wario, all of those guys got a really big facelift in that game. And yeah, some of it was cheap, like Mario's down throw, but man, I had so much fun with them. This is also where Mega Man got introduced, and I also kind of had a pretty nasty pocket Wii Fit trainer. So I don't know, I just had a ton of fun with this one. It will always be where my most fond Smash Bros. Related memories are. Biggest personal impact. Now this one was hard, but I ultimately went with Super Mario 64 because that game has just stayed with me my entire life. I associate that game heavily with my late brother, and it's one that we both just adored from the moment we saw it. There are a ton of people that say it doesn't hold up, that it hasn't aged well, and all those sorts of things, and I just honestly don't agree. I think the movement in this game was never beaten across any of the Mario games up until Mario Odyssey. I think Mario Odyssey is the very first one to kind of replicate and possibly outdo the movement of Super Mario 64. Even if I just go in to basically do an 8-star run, I do that all the time. I'll get get through Bomb Bomb Battlefield, Thwomp's Fortress, and run through the levels like that until I get 8 stars and do that first fight against Bowser. Just that is enough of a dopamine hit for me to feel satisfied, and we've beaten the game many times. My brother actually did collect all 120 stars, and I've just got so many fond memories trying to get onto the castle early on in the game by like jumping onto the hedges. I was never able to pull that off, but I tried. I just don't think you can talk about video games without talking about Super Mario 64. There were a lot of games that were before this game and a lot of games that came after this game. It's super, super special. Favorite art style. Now this one almost went to Phantasy Star Online, but it won best soundtrack, and then I realized Mega Man Legends, dude. Man, I love the art style of this game. From the very first time I ever played it, which was actually on the Nintendo 64 via Mega Man 64, I was in love with the art style, and it absolutely baffles me that there are not, like, you know how there are a ton of Chrono Trigger inspired like indie RPGs? Why are there not just a shitload of indie games inspired by Mega Man Legends art style out there? Like, if I was developing an indie game, I would absolutely steal this art style because it is timeless. It looks good whether it's in the lowest resolution possible or upscaled. All the characters have so much personality and expression. This game really does have it all, and it's got such a unique art style that really nothing else looks like. I just can't understand why people don't try to replicate it within their own games. Like, it would be a slam dunk. Best story. This was one I was stuck on for a long time. I had 4 or 5 different choices here, but I ultimately had to think about the writing, and I think Disco Elysium has perhaps the best writing in a video game that I've personally ever seen. It's one of the few video games I've played where when I left it, I like legitimately felt smarter, and it made me want to learn more about the world around me. It's just so well written from the very beginning of the game, where it's sort of this murder mystery thing, to the very end where you're revealed the unlikely origin of all of these things. Even when you think the game is about to lead you down a wrong path, it will always turn left and end up taking you down a story that you're not going to expect. And I like how every person that's going to try this game is going to have a different experience based on the way that they build their characters and based on the dice rolls and the interactions that they have and the things that they choose to invest time in. And I also think that just the very idea of leveling up your character based on personality traits and thoughts, and then how those thoughts sort of change your overall self-perception, is just such a genius concept, and I truly don't think there's ever going to be anything that's quite like Disco Elysium. And now, my favorite game of all time. I think I've briefly mentioned this from like time to time, but there are a lot of people that are surprised when I say that this is my favorite game, which is so funny because it's pretty much my personality in real life. Earthbound is my favorite game of all time. I played this on an original Super Nintendo. I'm incredibly thankful that I got to have that experience as a kid, and while I'm also incredibly thankful that this game has become sort of the massive game that it has become, where it used to, not have a lot of attention around it, and now it's considered one of the best games of all time. I'm super thankful that it got the flowers that it deserved all these years later, but there was a time where this felt like it was my game, that it was the game that only I was playing and no one else really understood. And then I slowly started discovering Starman.net and all of the other fan sites and learning about the characters, and then seeing Ness in Super Smash Bros. And worrying every single entry of Super Smash Bros. That he might get cut, and thankfully he hasn't, mostly because he has that OG status, I think. I'm just such a staunch defender of this game, and I encourage everybody to try it. Truthfully, I would love to make a video focused on Earthbound. The problem is that I love it so much and hold it in such a high regard that I just don't feel like I have it in me yet, and I haven't figured out the way I want to express how much of an incredible impact it's had on me. Even now, I'm kind of at a loss for words when I try to explain just how impactful it was. But to give you an idea, when I graduated from college, my family wanted to get me a class ring, and on the inside of my class ring it says wisdom, courage, and friendship, and that comes from the opening speech that Buzz gives you when you encounter him in the very beginning of the game at the meteorite, and he basically says 3 things are of utmost importance: wisdom, courage, and friendship. And I have truthfully kept that little silly phrase in the back of my mind my entire life, because the game has meant that much to me, and oddly enough it's paid off in a lot of ways. always. Sometimes I think about it when I encounter a difficult situation and think about keeping my head up high, staying strong and staying true to the things that I believe in and protecting the people that I care about. Earthbound is such a wonderful game and so many people have said things about it. It's kind of hard ground to cover and be like original with it, but I think I've got it in me. I just haven't figured out exactly how I want to talk about this game. But yeah, this is my favorite game of all time. It probably always will be, and it's the one that I will say that I just lean full into nostalgia on. But I've also probably beaten it 50, 60 times, so to me it absolutely holds up and it's a perfect game. So yeah, I hope you guys liked this video. This was kind of a weird one for me, completely unscripted. I wanted to just talk off the cuff, so I know there's probably some weird phrasings in here, but I really wanted this one to be authentic and just kind of myself. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, any and all thoughts, I want to hear them. If you're still here, thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay humble.